They do away with the purchase on all their stuff.
It's all leased.
It's all.
Yeah, CBS lease is there.
That's a problem.
And that's why they're so difficult to take home. If you book the next day, for instance, they will let you take it home. But they won't even lock them up on Capitol Hill. So you have to keep coming.
You hear Anderson Cooper?
I can't do federal procurement standpoint. That's why I had to go with something like a body.
And a lot of you won't, something.
Well, they might not. I mean, the guy that repped not repped, got me the switch is now the body. So,
Hey Eric, this is Dave Jenkins. I'm calling, I might as well get the, and if they don't talk, you know.
the comments are great, but they're about that big. They're not big at all.
Yeah, I'll shoot it for live.
This weighs very little, and it comes with a little plate I can put in between my battery and the camera, and it'll feed it from my battery, or whatever.
Yeah, the comments just have
Yeah.
they have a,
Okay. Yeah.
put them out in the back.
It draws more than the camera is. I've been on occasion, yeah, and there are no specs on what this thing is. All they will tell you is that when the battery
All right,
is
thank you
full,
very
it should
much.
run 2 hours on its internal battery.
Actually, it does.
But it depends on how old it is. CBS has a couple.
So it sounds like they're not gonna talk to me on PO.
So
If
the
they
battery
find out
doesn't
I have a
have
live shot, turn around.
2 hours.
Or extra security.
I see Anderson Cooper. All far. Yeah, not the companies on drive or just walk.
One of these had a problem when I was at the court, the SDI app, chassis maker had some kind of bad damage. And CBS, maintenance guy didn't know that he wasn't supposed to repair it. They're not supposed to touch it, they're not supposed to open it. If there's a problem, they're supposed to send us back. Live. Yeah. So weird, because I put a note on the box, my name and number, in case they needed further explanation. And I got a call like 2 weeks after, your line was ready, where would you like to pick it up? I said, yes, well, it was CBS maintenance. Oh, I'll tell you, you need to take that up to the news desk. Hand it over.
It's like the ABC goes here yesterday. Television goes. ABC is found the profile after the give to everybody. Camera. They had to do it themselves. Set those up where they're all.
They only use them 2 days.
When they used to do that, it really depended on the baseline setup of the camera. Because you can feed it all this information, that the baseline wasn't set up by somebody consistent. The camera still didn't do that the same, you know. So,
Morning, everybody. This is your 2-minute warning, so don't feel like you need to rush. I'm going to run through who we have today because it's been shifting. And we should be starting relatively close to on time today, so I appreciate your patience with us the last couple days. So this morning we will have our usual weather update. Today from NOAA we will have Chris Wamsley and Dr. Neil Jacobs. FEMA Office of Response and Recovery, Jeff Byard. Health and Human Services, Dr. Bob Kadlec. From the U.S. Coast Guard, Admiral Meredith Austin. From the American Red Cross, Charlie English. From FEMA's Office of Disability Integration, Linda Mastandria. From the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disasters, Greg Forrester. And to close, we will have our Spanish language update from our FEMA spokesperson, Daniel Yargis. And also available to take questions during the question period, we will have from the National Flood Insurance Program, David Marstad. And from the Environmental Protection Agency, Reggie Cheatham. As usual, this will be on the record. We'll remind you to leave space for our ASL interpreter. And just a flag for a lot of our print journalists in the room. I know a lot of your broadcast compatriots have gotten tours of the NRCC or have gotten B-roll in the NRCC. If you are interested in heading to the NRCC to see how things operate when we're fully activated, please let me know and we're happy to walk you through for a tour. And we'll get started shortly.
Sorry?
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this morning's update on the whole community response to Hurricane Florence. This morning we'll have some brief remarks from some key speakers, and then we'll follow it up with some questions and answers. Of course, we are on the record. I'll just run through who we have. The agencies represented this morning. We have the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, FEMA's Office of Response and Recovery, Health and Human Services, U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the American Red Cross, the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disasters, FEMA's Office of Disability Integration, and of course we will close with a Spanish language update from our FEMA spokesperson Daniel Yargis. Also available for questions, we will have the National Flood Insurance Program and the Environmental Protection Agency. And with that, I will turn it over to Noah for a weather update.
Good morning. My name's Chris Wansley. I work with NOAA's National Weather Service. At around 7:15 this morning, the center of Hurricane Florence made landfall at Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. It is currently a Category 1 hurricane with 90-mile-an-hour winds, moving slowly at 6 miles an hour out of the west. Currently, there is a tornado watch in effect and will likely continue into tonight. Storm surge along the Carolina coast will continue into Saturday and in some areas Sunday night and into Monday morning. Expect higher levels of higher tides during high tide cycles, and the next high tide cycle along the Carolina coast is around noon today, Eastern Time. I do want to emphasize that this is only the beginning. Florence is a very slow mover. We'll continue to trek along the North Carolina and South Carolina coastline for the next 24 to 36 hours. It will not get to Columbia, South Carolina until Sunday midnight morning. We've already seen a foot of rain just north of Wilmington area. We're still expecting rainfall amounts of 20 to 30 inches, some isolated spots of 40 inches. Some of you may remember this is in comparison to September of 1999. The first half of that month of that year, we had Hurricane Dennis and Floyd that produced around the same amount of rainfall that we are anticipating with Florence. The only difference is back then it was within 14 days, and we're looking at the same amount of rainfall in 3 days. Some of the river levels are going to be forecast to exceed the historic levels, and some of those were during Hurricane Floyd. We must emphasize for your own safety, to not drive where water covers the roadways, especially at night. A lot of the flooding is going to start in the river stem levels later on tonight near the coastline and increase Sunday into Monday further inland. Always remember, turn around, don't drown. That's the main thing that we always say. Concern beyond that continues with the track as it moves into the Appalachians Sunday into Monday, and also into the Mid-Atlantic region early next week. Due to the recent rainfall we've had over the last couple of weeks, it will not take that much rainfall for additional flash flooding to occur in these areas. 1 to 3 inches in a couple hours will lead to flash flooding. Not as much as the main step rivers as we anticipate over the Carolinas. And finally, the National Hurricane Center's next update will be at 11 o'clock a.m.
Thank you. Good morning. Neil Jacobs from NOAA. In addition to forecast and decision support from the National Weather Service, NOAA deploys assets to support recovery and response. NOAA's navigation response teams are pre-staging to assist in reopening ports as soon as possible. The National Geodetic Survey has aircraft on standby to support FEMA overflights for affected areas. NOAA's Office of Response and Recovery is also on standby to assist the Coast Guard in any possible chemical or oil spills. The SARSAT system is actively providing distress and specific location information to the Coast Guard. NOAA is working with local emergency managers and industry to help amplify our forecast message, including working through over 8,000 Weather Ready Nation ambassadors. Although the storm has made landfall, our work is not done. I want to say thank you to our hardworking team, from the response and recovery personnel across NOAA to our reconnaissance crews in the Office of Marine and Aviation Operations. And additionally to the National Weather Service and National Hurricane Center employees who've been working 24/7 shifts. Many of these individuals have been sheltered in place for many days. Thank you.
Good morning. Again, my name is Jeff Byard. I'm the Associate Administrator for Response and Recovery. I want to start this morning by, again, thanking the media and our partners. You've done a tremendous job in helping us amplify the message of how serious and the potential deadly this storm is and will continue to be. As our partners at NOAA and the Weather Center just briefed, this is not the end of it. 24 to 36 hours remain of a significant threat. From heavy rain, heavy surge, not just in North Carolina, but obviously down as we move into South Carolina. The message was very much amplified last night, again, through our media partners. Things like that I witnessed firsthand about, Category 3 to Category 2, Category 2 to Category 1. It was very clear that that's a wind indicator, not a surge and rain indicator, which has not dropped, as you can see. So, again, want to thank your part of being a part of our team as far as getting that message out and to evacuate. We stand ready to support our state and local first responders. There are many areas that are currently in the heart of the storm, and there are many areas that will be as the day moves through today, tomorrow, and through the weekend. As you know, there are certain areas that where our first responders, it is not safe for them to respond, and we fully support that, by all means. So those citizens that did not heed the evacuation warnings, it's time to stay where you are, do the best you can to protect yourself and property and your family. We are in constant contact with both North Carolina, South Carolina, and also Virginia. There at the state level, we also have teams that are embedded at our state emergency operations centers and are in contact with our local emergency managers. Both states have activated their National Guard as well as their emergency operations plan. As you know, our National Guard does tremendous work across our nation, and they just do a wonderful job both at the national level and also their state duty of protecting the citizens of their representative states. We've also partnered with our good friends and partners that you see on the stage, but heavily engaged with Department of Defense as we get ready to respond to this. We have what we need. We have what we need staged throughout the area, both as far as manpower and teams, as well as commodities, resources, communications. We've also heavily engaged with our partners at the private sector. Our focus, as you can see, priority is going to be life-saving, but on the monitors, it's also the effort's going to be stabilizing the critical lifelines in a very expedited manner. I have to reiterate, we have to set those expectations. This is going to be a duration. Power will be off. Infrastructure will be damaged or destroyed. Homes will be damaged or destroyed. So we need your help in level setting those expectations to our citizens and to our state and local governments. Heed local warnings. I can't emphasize that enough. Heed your local and state warnings. Protect yourself, protect your families. Don't put our first responders' lives in jeopardy. Do what you need to do as part of the team as well. And that message is to our citizens, both impacted currently and that will be impacted by the effects of Hurricane Florence. At this time, I want to turn it over to a good partner and a dear friend, Dr. Bob Catlick with the Health and Human Services.
Thanks a lot,
Dr.
Jeff.
Catlick, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Bob Cadlick with the Health and Human Services. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. To Jeff's point, we've been working closely with FEMA and our state and local partners well before the storm. Secretary Azar spoke to the governors, and I've spoken to the state health officials to know what resources are in place to assist them to save lives in the event of the worst case scenario. We've also been working very closely to declare public health emergencies in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia that will ease the ability for individuals as well as hospitals to take care of folks affected by this storm. We've deployed more than 500 personnel. These are Public Health Commission Corps officers who are currently working in medical shelters around the region, assisting local communities, as well as several hundred disaster medical assistant teams who are positioned around the region to respond, if necessary, should there be a requirement to assist people who have specific health needs. We've worked extensively before the storm with state and local officials identifying individuals who are particularly vulnerable during events like this, people who are dependent on electrical equipment such as ventilators, or people who have requirements for dialysis, to ensure that we know where they live and we can provide them services before the storm arrives as well as during the storm. Lastly, I just want to make a point that Secretary Azar has mobilized the entire Department of HHS, not only the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, but the Centers for Disease Control, CMS, and HRSA to be ready to assist our state and local partners to save lives and help those communities at risk. Thank you very much, and now I'll turn over to the Coast Guard.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. My name's Rear Admiral Meredith Austin with the Coast Guard. The safety of the people in the hurricane's path, as well as our own members and their families, remain our top priority, and we're continuing to work in close concert with FEMA, Army Corps, and our other federal, state, local, and private sector partners. We have Coast Guard personnel embedded with FEMA, DoD, and state emergency management agencies to enable a coordinated whole-of-government response. The Coast Guard has positioned 40 aircraft immediately outside the storm's path, which is about 20% of the Coast Guard's total aviation assets, to be ready to begin search and rescue operations as soon as it is safe to do so. In addition, we have shallow water response boat teams and deployable specialized forces to provide law enforcement, maritime security, as well as oil and hazardous materials response teams to come in immediately once the storm passes. We have over 7,100 Coast Guard members involved in the response so far and are ready to flow in more resources and assets when needed. The ports of Wilmington and Morehead City in North Carolina and the Port of Virginia remain closed at this time. The Coast Guard and Army Corps, NOAA, and other port partners are prepared to restore port operations with assets that have already been pre-staged as soon as it is possible once the storm passes and it is safe to do so. For those of you in the path of the storm, we continue to urge you to stay off the water, as our SAR assets, as I mentioned before, are still degraded or unavailable until the winds die down to a safe level. And one other thing is that social media is a poor distress calling system for a number of reasons. We can't stress strongly enough that people in distress need to call 911 if able to do so. Some of the lessons we learned and incorporated during last year's hurricanes is the use of aggregate social media to find hotspots to know where to vector in resources. However, for one-on-one rescuing of personnel, it's not efficient enough, so please, we urge you to use 911 if possible. And finally, once the storm is past, hazards may still be present. Stay in a safe location while the Coast Guard and other state and local authorities assess damage and disperse additional resources. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. My name is Ray Alexander. I'm from the headquarters, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm the Director of Contingency Operations. I'm here today to talk about the Corps' preparedness to respond under Emergency Support Function 3, Stafford Act, in support of FEMA and our state and local partners. But first, I'd like to mention the support the Department of Defense is providing, as Mr. Byard highlighted. The Department of Defense and Army have deployed over 9,700 personnel. That's active and reserve component, and Department of the Army, Department of Defense civilians. In addition, key equipment has been positioned in the area. Vehicles capable of transiting high water, fixed-wing aircraft, rotary wing, both light and heavy. Helicopters have been positioned, in addition to amphibious vessels that are in the Army's inventory. To date, Department of Defense has received over 25 mission assignments at $81 million. As far as the Corps is concerned, the Corps is in position and prepared to respond now. All our key leaders are located within the Carolinas. Today, our Deputy Commanding General for Civil Emergency Operations, Major General Spellman, is working his way to North Carolina, where he will link up with our Wilmington District Commander, Colonel Rob Clark, and they will engage at the State Emergency Operations Center and meet with key federal, state, local, other federal agency partners. In addition, Brigadier General Diana Holland from our South Atlantic Division, she will be forward as well in both South and North Carolina today. To date, the Corps has over 15 mission assignments, $5.3 million, and additionally over $1.3 million of our own flood control coastal emergency funds that allow us to prepare for and respond to flooding. In terms of missions that we expect to execute, temporary power is probably job number one we anticipate. And with that, we have our specialized power planning and response teams in position in both North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia if needed. We're there with our 249th Engineer Battalion, Prime Power, and also augmented by contractors who will actually assist us in doing assessments and installing generators for critical infrastructure where needed. We are prepared to do infrastructure assessments of critical facilities in collaboration with EPA. Assessments on water or wastewater will be conducted. And then we're prepared to conduct other missions as assigned, debris, housing, temporary roofing, missions that we normally do in these types of events. Additionally, we have flood fight teams in position in the area and material to mitigate areas that we know that are going to flood or be able to quickly respond areas where flooding is occurring. As far as dams are concerned, I think I briefed yesterday, the Corps has 5 dams in Virginia and North Carolina. All those dams have sufficient capacity to receive the amount of rainfall based upon the prediction and also the projected path of the storm. And then there are other federal dams, specifically dams on Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Jackson, South Carolina. We have personnel there on both garrisons prepared to offer technical subject matter expertise and respond if necessary. We do not anticipate any of these dams failing of any kind or dangers downriver. And then there are state and local dams and private sector dams as well. We'll be monitoring the status of those dams, but those are actually controlled and managed, again, by state, local governments. And then navigation, as the Admiral said, we're working closely with NOAA and the U.S. Coast Guard. Our survey vessels, our dredges, they're in safe harbor now. But as soon as the storm passes and the sea state allows, we'll be working with our partners to ensure that the ports, Morehead City, Wilmington, are open as soon as possible, Atlantic Intercoastal Waterway, and key federal inlets as well. Lastly, I would say some things that we are planning for. Potentials are North Carolina 12, which runs the length of the Outer Banks. It's had a history of being breached at times. We're doing planning in the event there's a breach, and we're receiving an assignment to repair that breach. We're looking for the potential debris mission, however, debris in the form of livestock, specifically hogs in eastern Carolina. There is a history of a large number of livestock being killed as a result of flooding in these storms. So we're prepared to do that. We are fully prepared for whatever may come. Again, our leaders are forward, and thank you.
I'm Charlie English with the American Red Cross, and I'd like to highlight a family reunification website that we operate in case you have been separated from your family, or if you're concerned about whether your family is okay or not. And you can get to that Safe and Well website at redcross.org, and under the Get Help tab, it will direct you to where you can post a message about being safe and well in a certain location. I'd also like to mention and ask for your consideration in giving blood. We've had to cancel over 130 blood drives in the impacted area, and you may be at home wanting to know what can you do to help. That's how you can help. So if you're in a non-impacted area, we would appreciate your consideration in giving blood. I'd also like to ask, we know we're going to need volunteers. It's going to take a lot of people to help with the post-impact sheltering and distribution of emergency supplies that we partner with government partners and other faith-based organizations to operate. But we don't want you just to respond to these scenes. There needs to be some training, so we would appreciate if you would register at redcross.org and any number of other fine private nonprofit organizations that you can volunteer with. We can get you trained up real quick and put you to work. And at this point, and I would say we continue, of course, to transition resources to the area of impact so that we are ready to do the post-impact sheltering and taking care of people. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our friends with the Office of Disability Integration with FEMA.
Good morning. Today, FEMA's Office of Disability Integration and Coordination remains focused on life safety for people with disabilities who've been impacted by Florence. Together with the Red Cross and HHS, we're watching New Bern very closely because that county has the highest population of people with disabilities in the impacted areas. North Carolina has requested 2 EMAC FAST teams. FAST teams are basically teams that go in to assess shelters to ensure that they can meet the needs of people with disabilities who are going to be there. They're using what's called the CMIST protocol, where they assess communication, maintaining health, independence, services and support, and transportation to ensure that the shelters have the capacity to serve the folks that with disabilities that will be staying there. The Office of Disability Integration and Coordination has deployed disability integration advisors to support Region 4, as well as the states of North and South Carolina. These disability integration advisors are on the ground to advise senior leadership on, to ensure decisions being made will consider the needs of and the impact on survivors with disabilities who've been impacted by Florence. The Office of Disability Integration and Coordination is leaning forward. We are not waiting for response to be over before we start looking at recovery. We are bringing together representatives from FEMA's Individual Assistance Branch, from the Office of Disability Integration and Coordination, and our partners at the Red Cross to plan for the best way to transition people with disabilities out of the shelters and back into independent living in their communities. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Greg Forrester. I'm with the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. We're the largest association of disaster nonprofits in the nation. We're made up of 68 national member organizations, and then we have an organization in every state and territory. For the last 4 days, we've been working alongside of FEMA and State Emergency Management to make sure that our organizations are staged and ready to respond as soon as the storm clears. What we are is members of each and every community that's been disaster affected. 75% of our members are faith-based organizations with locations in each community across the nation. Right now, we're waiting for the storm to clear, but many of our organizations like Red Cross, Salvation Army, Southern Baptist Disaster Response are already engaged in housing and feeding missions for those that are sheltering. When the storm clears, our organizations will then stand up to go ahead and further that mission. We will also be engaged in cleanup work and other responses as needed. Right now, we're concentrating on volunteering and donations. We know that this nation is one that volunteers very readily. Sometimes those volunteers come in a form that we can't utilize them right away. So what we're asking for is go to our website, www.nvoad.org. We have a means by which you can go ahead and register to volunteer in each state that's been disaster affected. We also have a donations portal that's on there. We ask that for those donations, we're looking at just corporate in-kind donations to come through for things that we know are going to be needed. The best donation is cash. What we have found is as many disasters, things arrive into the disaster zone, we end up spending much more time working on donations than we do actually working with survivors. And so we ask that you don't do any clothing drives or any of those kinds of things at this point in time. We will let you know as far as what the needs are in the field. What we do know is commodities have been staged extremely well with FEMA and with our state emergency management partners. We are engaged and embedded within every state emergency management office and also here at FEMA at headquarters. Again, looking to volunteer, go to the website. As Mr. English stated, the Red Cross is an excellent organization to go ahead and volunteer with. You can go to our website and find all the other organizations on how you can affiliate with them so that you are prepared to respond in a coordinated way as we bring response and recovery to these disaster-affected communities. Thank you.
Hola, buenos días. Soy Daniel Yarguez, portavoz de FEMA. Queremos darle una actualización en español. La tormenta se movilizó en el norte de Carolina esta mañana a las 7 de la mañana con vientos de 90 millas por hora más o menos sostenidos y también moviéndose muy lentamente a 6 millas por hora, dejando mucha agua e inundaciones. Como lo dijo el señor Bayer, estamos apoyando a los rescatistas en las áreas afectadas, en Carolina del Norte, Carolina del Sur. Tenemos equipos de búsqueda y rescate y nuestra prioridad es salvar vidas. Es lo que queremos hacer y estamos trabajando muy duro con las autoridades locales y estatales para poder salvar vidas y que las personas estén sanas y a salvo. Bueno, también continúa nuestra coordinación con las autoridades locales y estatales, ya que tenemos equipos en los centros de operaciones de los estados de Carolina del Norte, Carolina del Sur y Virginia, también listos para apoyar con las necesidades que puedan tener los estados. Continuamos también la coordinación aquí en nuestras oficinas de Washington, D.C., en nuestro Centro de Operaciones Nacional y los centros de operaciones de la región 4 que están en Atlanta y en la región 3 que están en Filadelfia también. Y con equipos de la Guardia Nacional, ya que también ellos son un socio de nosotros, y también con equipos del Army y del Departamento de Defensa. Mensaje también de nuestros colaboradores y socios. Si quieren ayudar, ser voluntarios, a veces la mejor forma de hacerlo es por medio de dinero en efectivo, ya que cuando las personas mandan cosas, a veces se tardan más en tratar de ver para dónde tienen que ir esos artículos. El dinero en efectivo llega mucho más rápido y más eficiente a las personas impactadas, o si quieren también ser voluntarios para ayudar a las personas que fueron afectadas, también les pedimos que hagan eso y que tengan mucha paciencia. A lo mejor no van a poder regresar a sus casas inmediatamente, les pedimos que tengan mucha paciencia y que continúen acatando las indicaciones de las autoridades locales y estatales de no regresar a casa si no es adecuado, porque puede ser también peligroso. Muchas gracias.
We'll now open it up for Q&A. As a reminder, please state your name and affiliation, and we'll limit it to one follow-up for time considerations.
All right, yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Heather Timmons from Courts. I think this might be a question for Rear Admiral Austin, but
Great.
There's a lot of social media, crowdsourced rescue websites and things. Many of them sprang up during Hurricane Harvey. They sometimes got there before the first responders could. These are registering people to do rescues again. I wonder if you could tell us about whether you think they're safe or effective, or you would recommend that people call out to them if 911 isn't working for them? And do they make your job harder to do in the long run?
I mean, social media, I mean, it's the way a lot of people communicate. What we discovered last year, though, was that using social media as a tool to get calls for help to the people who are actually responding is a little problematic, because it's not secure. People's privacy is not necessarily considered. Unfortunately, we found that some unscrupulous people might take advantage of people because people now know that they're in a disaster area, and that they're vulnerable. So if that's the only way that people can reach because they don't have phone for whatever reason, or they don't have electricity, then if people are able to call out to social media, if friends see that or others see that, if they can then call 911 just to make sure it gets into the system, because it might not necessarily be the Coast Guard that's going to be the ones responding. If it goes to a 911 center, that call center is able to then dispatch the most appropriate and the closest and available asset to actually do that rescue. So that's why we, understand people will sometimes use social media, but it's not very efficient in order for us to make sure that we get to the right people who are actually in distress. But if that's the only method they have, if people who see those messages can then contact 911, then we could be sure that they're entered into the system, so we're able to actually see that they're in need and we're able to rescue them.
And what about some of these civilian rescue networks? There's something called crowdsourced rescue, and right now they're registering people who want to do rescues. is that effective? Do they get in your way? I don't know. Sure.
Let me, to complement what the Admiral was saying, first and foremost, we don't want to have first responders in danger, and we don't want to have citizens in danger. Very admirable that our citizens, that's exactly what we've asked to do. We saw that in Harvey with the wonderful work that the Cajun Navy has done with Neighbors Helping Neighbors. So, what we've done in conjunction with the Coast Guard and others, we also utilize crowdsourcing. We don't only utilize that from an external affairs part, we've operationalized our crowdsourcing capabilities within FEMA. And what does that mean? It means that we have those individuals on our operations floor, and what they've been able to do and what they will continue to do is look where needs are and make sure that we're communicating those pockets down. Again, I want to reiterate, we're not a 911. We're not designed to be a 911 service, nor should the FEMA at the headquarters level in Washington, D.C. be utilized as a 911 service. I don't think our locals on the coast would want D.C. Dispatching those 911 services. But what we are able to do with that is identify where those pockets are and make sure that we've got and can get that down not only to the Coast Guard but to our urban search and rescue teams that are embedded with our local first responders. And these are the best of the best. They train for this. Water can look, one way it's very deceiving. So, the last thing that we want to do is have, citizens helping citizens, and then that compound what our first responders have to go do. So, there's a lot of that. Social media has been a excellent tool, and we're incorporating that as part, and not just at the federal level, but also in our state and local levels to understand that. So, I hope that answers your question. Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us a number for how many SWIFT current search and rescue teams you have positioned, ready to help? It seems like, rising water is going to be the main concern of this storm.
Yes, ma'am. That's a good question. We have over 1,100 federal urban search and rescue personnel dispatched throughout the 2 states, but that's just one resource. Our National Guards, our Department of Defense, we have high water vehicles and teams that are ready to go that can do water rescue. There's a big difference between, as you well know, swift water and just high water. So we have teams that can do that. We have our partners at the Coast Guard who lead that federal effort for coordination effort. Think about the amount of coordination it takes to have people on the water doing rescues, also wind safe to do so. Our helicopters, our air rescues, not just from the Coast Guard through National Guard and others. Again, the last thing we want to see is first responders' lives in danger trying to go save lives. So the Coast Guard heads that effort up. So we have a lot of resources available. That's not just the urban search and rescue teams. And when safe to do so, we'll do so. But we have adequate amount. We've really, put these teams out there. They're not only at the state level, they're all the way down to the local level. And this is what they do. These are firefighters, by day, so they understand the language of firefighters. And when we put them together, it's a very successful program. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, I'm Colleen Long from AP.
Yes, ma'am.
So, related to social media, I wanted to ask about the rumor page, the FEMA's rumor page, and are there any particular rumors there's some on the website, but I wondered if this was the first time that had been created specifically for a natural disaster and to quash rumors, and then also, is there anything specific you wanted to make sure people didn't think were true? This morning, my husband and I were talking about sharks in in the water and stuff like that.
Well, there are sharks in the water. I mean, that's not a rumor, but I don't think we have a Sharknado effect or anything like that. We're human, and we're human in a disaster. Rumors are going to be out there. People are going to see things that, your adrenaline gets going. There's a number of things that do that. We do have the rumor page established at FEMA. A lot of our states and locals do the same thing. We want to get accurate information to our public. I mean, that's very, very important. And rumors, for the sake of rumors, they don't help things. That's not being a team player. That's just clouding, a bandwidth that we need to cut through additional, really BS to get through, and that's not needed. So, but we also want information as much as we want to pass it. So I would encourage you to visit our rumor page on our website and others. But rumors are going to happen. We understand that. I've been through a lot of disasters, as many of my partners on the stage and downrange have, and we know that's going to happen. I'll come back to you. Yes, ma'am.
Eva McKen, Spectrum News. I'm seeing comparisons, because this is a slow-moving weather event, to what happened in Houston. And I'm wondering, are those comparisons accurate? And if so, what did you learn from that event that is helping you prepare for this? I know that one specific problem last year is when people were trapped and they would call, they would be classified as needing a water rescue, but maybe they were in a really dire situation,
Yes,
but they were categorized with everyone else that needed to be in a water rescue. How have you adapted to address those needs?
That is a good question to illustrate what we said before, that no two disasters are alike. The rain totals may be similar, but the terrain's definitely different from Houston, fourth largest urban center in our country, to the coastline and inland areas of North and South Carolina that is very populated but sparsely populated. It's not as urbanized, so there's just a different makeup as that. What I hope we've learned is my partner, Mr. Merstead, who manages our National Flood Insurance Program, I hope people have bought flood insurance. Because you're going to need it for this event, and it is going to flood. As far as how individuals are classified, that's a local and state question. We want to make sure that we've got the resources that they may need to support those rescues. Yes, ma'am.
Question for Dr. Catholic. What are some of the hazards that people currently in the impacted zone or people returning to the area should be keeping in mind? I know we're a couple of days away from people being able to return, maybe for people who are there.
Sure, a lot of people suffer a lot of injuries as a result in the cleanup that happens during storms, after storms, from fallen trees. There's always the risk of electrical power, electrocutions as a result of down power lines. So the key thing is individuals just really need to be cautious about how they re-entered an area, whether the officials have given them clearance to do so. And then, again, people who want to do it themselves need to make sure they have the proper equipment and safety equipment to ensure that they don't get hurt or injured. So those are very commonly the kinds of injuries. Longer term, there's always the risk of, let's say, fungal growths or something in hot, humid areas that can cause respiratory or exacerbation of respiratory illnesses. But there are a whole variety of injuries that can happen. I guess the key thing here is for people to kind of monitor themselves, their families, watch what they're doing, and listen to the officials in terms of when it's safe to return to their homes and to their local areas.
Any additional questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, Ben Kessling from the Wall Street Journal. Can you just give a quick, another quick statistical update and on casualties, deaths, how many people, just sort of a top line numbers of people affected at this point?
Right. I wouldn't. I don't have any verified casualties. That would be best. A question for our state and local partners. As you know, FEMA. We don't verify casualties when it comes to that, but. It's early, hopefully, we prevent as many as we can through your good work of getting that message of evacuation out there. But that's a question that I would shift down to both North and South Carolina for there.
Okay, and then a separate question. I know CBP officers are doing law enforcement assistance in the affected areas. I think ICE officials are also down there. Has there been a blanket order come down from DHS, Justice Department, etc., that says that undocumented immigrants will not be arrested, will not be taken into custody, that they don't have to worry about coming to shelters? At what level have those directives been given, if they have been?
I'm not aware of any directives in either way. I can speak on the authorities that FEMA has, and we, under our Stafford Act, we can provide that immediate assistance to any human that needs it.
So is there, that means that there are no guarantees that undocumented immigrants will not be taken into custody, arrested, face deportation if they go to facilities.
I'm not going to say, I'm not going to use the terminology guarantee. What I'm going to say is we're going to help any human that needs help in this situation. For your specific questions, that would be best directed to the department, or we can get with external affairs and do that, because I don't want to speak on orders, directives that I've not seen.
So there's no kind of cross-departmental coordination on this. So
the cross-departmental coordination on this is about saving lives for Florence, and there's a good cross-department coordination. We are and not just cross department, as you can see up here, cross agency. So that's our focus. And again, any other questions on that, I would ask that you ask for the.
That's understandable. The cross-department focus is to save lives. There's also people out there who are concerned that if they go.
If you have a need, let me make this clear. If you have a need or your life's in danger, please seek help. And you're a human being, please seek help.
But FEMA can't say that they won't be taken into custody.
FEMA does not take anybody into custody. So, did I have any other questions? I think I've answered that one pretty well. So, anybody got anything else? Thank you again for your voice. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We will have an additional update today telephonically at 3:15, and we do anticipate keeping this pace through the weekend with a 9:15 morning brief. Thank you all for your support. As always, download the FEMA app and stay updated with information, and please stay safe.